Ever get that weird thing like when you're staring at something and it kind of like disappears?
Oh, yeah.
Like
Yeah.
if you focus really hard on a word for too long, it all blends together.
Happens all the time.
Well, that's actually a real thing. It's called the Troxler effect, and that's what we're diving into today.
Sounds pretty trippy.
It is, and the science behind it is interesting enough. But get this, it's actually spawned some pretty wild theories about, well, the nature of reality itself.
Okay, now I'm really intrigued.
Right, like we're talking hidden dimensions, mind control, even glitches in the Matrix. Seriously.
Whoa, okay, you've got my attention for sure. But before we jump into all that, maybe we should start with like, what exactly is the Troxler effect? I mean, I get the basic idea, but
Yeah, no, for sure. I think most people have experienced it without even realizing it.
probably, yeah.
But the science behind it is actually pretty straightforward. It all comes down to how our brains are wired. They're constantly filtering out information that's unchanging just to free up processing power for new stuff,
Yeah.
the important things.
So it's kind of like when you walk into a bakery and you immediately smell that fresh bread, but after a while you don't even notice it anymore.
Exactly. With the Troxler effect, it's our visual system that's doing the adapting. When you stare at something for a while, the neurons responsible for processing that image basically get tired, like they've seen enough.
And as a result, the image just fades away. Makes sense, but
But here's where things get interesting.
okay, lay it on me.
Some people believe those fading images are more than just tired neurons. They think it's a glimpse into something else entirely, something our brains normally block out for some reason.
Okay, yeah, like what?
Well, there's this theory, the hidden reality theory, and suggests that what we see as reality is just a tiny fraction of what's actually out there. They think there's a much bigger, more complex reality that our brains filter out, for whatever reason.
That's a pretty big claim, I gotta say.
It is, and it kind of makes you wonder, right? Like, what are we missing out on? One source even described it as seeing the raw data of the universe before our brains organize it into the reality that we experience every day.
That's a pretty wild thought.
Yeah, for sure. But things get even weirder.
Oh, there's more.
Oh yeah, we're just getting started. Let's talk about the mind control theory.
Mind control. Okay, now we're getting into some conspiracy theory territory.
Maybe, but it's still pretty interesting to think about.
Okay, I'm listening.
So this theory basically says that certain images or patterns could be designed to exploit this Troxler effect, to like sneak subliminal messages into our brains while they're fading in and out of our awareness.
So it's like those blink and you miss it messages in movies, but using the Troxler effect to slip past our conscious radar.
Exactly. And when you think about how many images we see every day, like advertising, social media, you name it.
It does make you wonder, like, what kind of impact those images could be having on us without us even realizing it.
Right, like are we really in control of our own thoughts and beliefs, or are we being manipulated?
It's a little unsettling, to say the least. But it also reminds us to be more aware of the information we're consuming and to question what we see.
It's like they say, don't believe everything you see.
Exactly. Now, I'm curious, where do we go from here?
Well, how about we delve into the gateway to altered states theory? It's a bit more spiritual.
Oh, okay, this sounds intriguing.
This one connects the Troxler effect to like ancient meditation practices and the idea of reaching a higher state of awareness. It suggests that by focusing on specific patterns, the kind that trigger this effect, we can actually hack our brains to bypass our usual filters.
So it's not about seeing something else, it's about seeing more deeply into ourselves.
Something like that. Some people who believe this theory say these altered states can unlock heightened intuition, creativity, even psychic abilities.
Wow. Okay, I've got to admit, I'm skeptical, but also kind of fascinated.
Me too. Have you ever had one of those moments where you're so focused on something that you completely lose track of time, like you're in the zone?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think we all have.
That's kind of what we're talking about here. That feeling of being in the flow is often linked to these altered states of consciousness.
So the idea is that the Troxler effect can help us reach those states more easily. Interesting. But there's one theory we haven't touched on yet, and I think it's the one that really captures the imagination, the simulation glitch theory.
Okay, yeah, we can't leave that one out. I mean, the idea that we're all living in a giant computer simulation.
Yeah.
It's like straight out of the Matrix, right?
Right. It's a bit mind-boggling, but also kind of cool. And according to this theory, the Troxler effect plays a key role.
Oh, how so?
Well, it suggests that those fading images aren't just our brains playing tricks on us, but actual glitches in the simulation itself, like moments where the code of reality peeks through.
So instead of a window into another reality, it's a window into the code running our reality. Okay, that's trippy. But before we get too carried away, it is important to remember that these are just theories.
Right, just theories. And to be honest, they're pretty far out there.
Exactly. We need to apply some critical thinking here, right?
Definitely. We can't just take these theories at face value. I mean, where's the evidence?
Well, that's the thing. There isn't any, at least not in the scientific sense. The Troxler effect itself, that's well documented.
Right, we know that's a real thing.
But all these other claims about mind control and simulation glitches, that's all speculation.
And we have to remember that the human brain is incredibly complex. And our perception can be easily influenced by, well, by a lot of things. Our expectations, suggestions from others, even our own desires can shape what we see and how we interpret it.
It's like those optical illusions that trick our eyes into seeing things that aren't really there. Our brains are constantly trying to make sense of the world, and sometimes they fill in the blanks with things that aren't really there.
Exactly. That's why it's so important to be critical thinkers, especially in this day and age, when we're bombarded with information from all directions.
We can't just passively absorb everything we see and hear. We need to question, evaluate, and be wary of claims that sound too good to be true.
And that's actually a perfect segue into the next part of our deep dive. We'll be exploring the tools and strategies we can use to navigate this complex landscape of information and develop our critical thinking skills. So where do we even start with this whole critical thinking thing?
Yeah, it's like, how do we actually become more discerning about the information we encounter every day, especially when, even our own perceptions can be unreliable, like we saw with the Troxler effect?
Well, I think the first step is cultivating a mindset of active inquiry. Instead of just passively absorbing whatever comes our way, we need to actually engage with information critically, ask questions, challenge assumptions.
Like, be more proactive in how we approach information.
Exactly. Don't just accept things at face value. Dig a little deeper. Look for evidence to support or refute the claims being made. Think like a detective investigating a case.
Oh, I like that analogy.
A good detective doesn't just take the first explanation they hear, right? They gather evidence, consider different perspectives, look for inconsistencies. We should do the same with the information we come across.
But the thing is, we're all prone to biases, aren't we? Those mental shortcuts our brains take to process information quickly. How do we account for that when we're trying to be objective?
Well, awareness is key. The more we understand our own biases, the better equipped we are to counter them. Like, take confirmation bias, for example. That's the tendency to seek out information that confirms our existing beliefs. It's a powerful force, and we need to be very conscious of it.
So how do we avoid falling into that trap?
We need to actively seek out diverse perspectives, even those that challenge our own. It can be uncomfortable, sure, but it's essential for developing a more nuanced understanding of complex issues.
So it's not just about being skeptical of the information itself, but also being skeptical of our own interpretations of that information.
Exactly. Critical thinking involves constant self-reflection. We should always be asking ourselves, am I seeing this clearly, or am I letting my biases cloud my judgment?
That's a tough one, though, especially when it's something we care deeply about. Emotions can get in the way of clear thinking.
Oh, absolutely. Emotions are powerful drivers of belief. And that's precisely why it's so crucial to develop strategies for managing those emotions and maintaining objectivity. One approach is to try to detach ourselves from the outcome.
Detach from the outcome? I'm not sure I follow.
Okay, so imagine you're a judge in a court case. You need to weigh the evidence impartially, right? Regardless of your personal feelings about the defendant.
Okay, I see what you mean.
It's about removing your ego from the equation and focusing on the facts.
So it's like taking a step back and trying to see the issue from a neutral perspective.
Precisely, like you're an outside observer. And another helpful strategy is to consider the opposite perspective.
So if I'm reading something that supports a view I agree with, I should also try to find articles that present the opposing view.
Exactly. It forces you to confront the weaknesses in your own arguments and consider alternative interpretations. It can be uncomfortable, but it's essential for growth.
That's like a mental workout.
Exactly. The more we challenge our beliefs, the stronger our critical thinking skills become. Now, circling back to the Troxler effect and those mind-bending theories we discussed earlier, what can we learn from them, even if we don't necessarily buy into all the claims?
Right. I think the biggest takeaway for me is that our perception of reality is subjective. What we see as real is filtered through our senses, our brains, our experiences.
Exactly. And that realization can be both empowering and humbling.
Empowering how?
Well, because it means we have agency in how we experience the world, but also humbling because it reminds us that our perspective is just one of many.
It also underscores the importance of empathy, right? Like trying to understand other people's perspectives, even when they're vastly different from our own.
Absolutely. If we acknowledge that everyone's reality is shaped by their unique experiences and biases, it becomes easier to bridge the divides between us. So what about the Troxler effect itself? Should we just dismiss it as a weird visual quirk?
I don't think so. I mean, it's a powerful reminder of the limitations of our perception. It shows us that what we see isn't always what's actually there.
Yeah, our brains are constantly filtering and interpreting information. Even something as basic as vision can be manipulated. It makes you think twice about what you're actually seeing.
It's like a wake-up call. Don't take your perceptions for granted. But we should also acknowledge that for some people, the Troxler effect isn't just a curiosity. It's a source of anxiety or even distress.
That's a really important point. We need to approach these topics with sensitivity and recognize that what might be a fun intellectual exercise for some can be a very real and challenging experience for others.
For sure. And if anyone out there is experiencing any kind of visual disturbances that are causing them concern, it's always best to consult with a medical professional. So before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, let's open up the conversation to you, our listeners. What are your thoughts on this whole Troxler effect thing? Have you ever experienced it yourself? Which of the theories we talked about resonated with you the most?
We'd love to hear your perspectives and insights. You can share your thoughts on our social media channels or leave a comment on our website. We really believe that the best conversations happen when everyone participates. So let's continue this deep dive together.
You know, it's kind of wild how something as simple as staring at a dot can lead to all these big questions about reality.
Right. Like, who knew that something so basic could send us down this rabbit hole of theories about hidden dimensions and simulated universes?
And yeah, we may not buy into all of those theories, but I think the Troxler effect still teaches us a lot about how our brains work.
Absolutely. It really underscores the power of perception and how our brains constantly filter and interpret the world around us.
Like, we think we're seeing the world objectively, but the Troxler effect shows us that's not always the case.
Right. Our brains are always filling in the gaps, making assumptions, and sometimes even tricking us into seeing things that aren't really there.
It's a good reminder to be humble about what we think we know and to always be open to questioning our assumptions.
And I think that's really the beauty of this whole exploration, you know? The Troxler effect, it's not just some weird visual quirk. It's a gateway to all these fascinating questions about consciousness, perception, the nature of reality itself.
It's like a little puzzle box that unlocks all these core mysteries.
Exactly, and it sparks that sense of wonder and curiosity, that drive to understand the world around us, even if those explanations sometimes get a little out there.
And hey, who knows? Maybe some of those seemingly crazy theories will turn out to be true someday. The history of science is full of examples of ideas that were once considered impossible, later becoming accepted as fact.
That's a good point. It reminds us to never stop questioning, to never stop exploring, and to always be open to the possibility that there's more to the universe than we currently understand.
So the next time you find yourself staring at something until it disappears, don't just shrug it off.
Yeah, take a moment to think about what's really happening, how your brain is creating your experience of reality.
And maybe, just maybe, it'll spark some of those big questions in you too.
And on that note, we'll bring this deep dive into the Troxler effect to a close. But before we sign off, we'd love to hear from you.
What are your thoughts on the Troxler effect? Have you ever experienced it? Which of the theories we discussed resonated with you the most?
Share your thoughts with us on our social media channels or leave a comment on our website. We're always excited to hear from our listeners and continue the conversation.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.